Hello friends. Welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 discovered the Primordial Omnitrix and got Harem of Gwen, Looma and Eunice. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Echoes of Antiquity. The ancient Galvan vault hung suspended in the amber light of twin suns, its hexagonal architecture defying Earth's familiar physics. Ben Tennyson stood at the threshold, emerald eyes reflecting the otherworldly glow of symbols etched into metal that predated human civilization. His breath crystallized in the artificially cooled atmosphere despite the sweat beading beneath his black t-shirt. Azimuth wasn't kidding about the security, Ben muttered, flexing his fingers before adjusting the familiar Omnitrix on his wrist. At 22, he'd grown into his lanky teenage frame, shoulders broadened by years of combat and cosmic adventure. The boyish enthusiasm remained in his eyes, but tempered now with the quiet confidence of a veteran hero. The message from Azimuth had been characteristically cryptic: coordinates, a warning about tampering with cosmic equilibrium, and a grudging acknowledgement that perhaps, Ben had earned the right to make this choice himself. Typical Azimuth, presenting cosmic responsibility as a backhanded compliment. 3 galvanic mechamorphs guarded the entrance, their obsidian bodies gleaming with circuitry patterns that pulsed with increasing agitation as Ben approached. Their cyclopic eyes narrowed simultaneously. Identification, demanded the central guard, voice modulating between frequencies that set Ben's teeth on edge. Ben raised his wrist, allowing the familiar Omnitrix to catch the light. Ben Tennyson, Azimuth sent me. The guards exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that manifested as ripples across their liquid metal forms. The first thinker has not authorized human access to Vault Primordius in 800 years. Well, he's authorized it now. Ben produced a small Galvan data crystal that pulsed with green light. Check the encryption signature if you don't believe me. The lead guard hesitated, then extended a tendril that engulfed the crystal momentarily. When it withdrew, the guard's eye had widened fractionally. Authentication confirmed. However, protocol requires verification of intent. Why has the first thinker granted you access to technologies deemed too volatile for interstellar distribution? Ben squared his shoulders. Because sometimes you need something volatile to fight something worse. The truth was more complicated. The Incarsine Empire had been expanding again, swallowing star systems with increasing voracity. The plumbers' resources were stretched thin across 3 galaxies. And something ancient had begun stirring in the void between dimensions, something that made even Paradox's perpetual smile falter during their last meeting. The guards parted with obvious reluctance, their bodies flowing aside like metallic water. The first thinker bears responsibility for consequences that may arise, the leader intoned. As do you, bearer of the Omnitrix. The massive vault door iris spiraled open, revealing a chamber that seemed to stretch impossibly beyond the exterior dimensions of the structure. Ben stepped inside, the air tingling against his skin like static electricity. Been bearing consequences since I was 10, Ben replied under his breath as the door sealed behind him with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, the vault breathed with ancient technology. Display pedestals arranged in concentric circles held artifacts that defied Ben's understanding, geometries that seemed to bend inward upon themselves. Materials that phased in and out of visible spectrum, devices that hummed with energies that made the hair on his arms stand on end. Ben moved purposefully toward the center, guided by the subtle vibration of his own Omnitrix. It had been doing that since they entered this sector of space, resonating like a tuning fork struck by an invisible hand. Whatever lay at the heart of this vault, it shared some fundamental frequency with the device that had defined his life since childhood. The central pedestal stood apart from the others, bathed in light that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Upon it rested what appeared at first glance to be another Omnitrix, but the resemblance ended at the basic concept. Where Ben's device was sleek and refined, this one was raw, primordial. Constructed of a material that resembled burnished copper crossed with living coral, it pulsed with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat exactly. Azimuth's recorded message played in Ben's mind. What you seek is not a replica of your Omnitrix, but its ancestor. The Primordial Omnitrix was the first attempt to catalog life's genetic diversity, created not by Galvan science, but by entities that walked the cosmos when my species was still learning to harness fire. It was flawed, unstable, and infinitely more powerful in ways even I don't fully comprehend. It does not merely sample DNA. It communes with the consciousness of every life form it has ever encountered across multiple dimensional planes. Ben circled the pedestal cautiously. The ancient device continued its hypnotic pulse, each beat sending ripples of amber light across its surface. Intricate patterns that resembled both circuit boards and organic tissue decorated its surface, constantly shifting like the flow of information itself. So why send me to get it now, after all these years? Ben had asked. Azimuth's holographic image had flickered momentarily. Because, Tennyson, the boundaries between dimensions are weakening. Something is attempting to cross over, something that existed when the Primordial Omnitrix was forged. I believe they are connected, somehow. And while I loathe admitting it, why? Oh, you have demonstrated a peculiar aptitude for handling power that exceeds your understanding. Now, standing before the artifact itself, Ben felt the weight of that backhanded faith. He extended his hand slowly, fingers hovering centimeters above the pulsating surface. Here goes everything, he murmured. The moment his fingertips brushed the device, the world exploded into light and sensation. The Primordial Omnitrix liquefied, flowing up his arm like molten metal that burned cold instead of hot. Ben gasped as it merged with his existing Omnitrix, the two technologies recognizing each other across eons of evolutionary design. Pain lanced through his nervous system, not localized to his arm but distributed across every cell simultaneously. Ben fell to his knees, gritting his teeth against a scream as reality fractured around him. Visions cascaded through his mind. Extinct species from forgotten worlds, civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth cooled, beings of pure energy that existed in dimensions where physical laws operated in reverse. And beneath it all, a presence, ancient, patient, and terrifyingly aware. Hello, bearer. The voice existed not as sound but as concept, unfurling directly in Ben's consciousness like a flower blooming in accelerated time. What? Who are you? Ben managed through clenched teeth. I am the Primordial Archive. The first catalog. The memory of species. You may call me Primus. Primus, Ben echoed, the name resonating strangely. Are you alive? A sensation like distant amusement filtered through the connection. Not as you understand life. I am a consciousness preserved within the matrix of what you call the Primordial Omnitrix. I was created to observe, to record, to remember those who would otherwise be forgotten. The pain began to subside, replaced by a tingling awareness that extended beyond Ben's physical form. He could feel the galvan vault around him, sense the quantum fluctuations in the air, taste the age of the metal beneath his knees. Slowly, Ben managed to stand, looking down at his wrist where the transformation had occurred. His familiar Omnitrix remained, but altered. The black and gray N-color scheme had acquired veins of that strange copper coral material, pulsing with amber light that synchronized with his heartbeat. The interface had expanded, symbols appearing that belonged to no language Ben recognized. We are synchronized now, Primus communicated. Your existing matrix provided the stability mine lacked. In return, I offer access to genetic codes your Omnitrix never cat. A logged species extinct before your universe cooled, variants from parallel evolutionary tracks, beings composed of energies your science cannot yet measure. Ben flexed his fingers, feeling somehow both heavier and lighter than before. Why now? Why me? The walls between realities grow thin. The Annihilari stir in their prison dimension. They sense weakness, opportunity. They hunger for what once was denied them. And what's that? Everything. The ominous reply hung in Ben's mind as a tremor ran through the vault. Not a physical shaking, but something deeper, a vibration at the level that set every atom humming with dissonance. Warning lights flashed as security systems detected a disturbance beyond their programming parameters. What's happening? Ben demanded, both aloud and through the mental link. Convergence begins. Prepare yourself, bearer. The air in the center of the vault began to shimmer, light bending around a point that seemed to both exist and not exist simultaneously. It expanded outward, forming a rift in reality itself, a tear in the fabric of space-time that revealed swirling chaos beyond. Ben's instincts kicked in immediately. He activated the newly merged Omnitrix. The familiar selection interface now overlaid with entirely new categories of transformation. Without conscious thought, his fingers selected a form he'd never seen before. He transformation was unlike any he'd experienced. Instead of the familiar rush of DNA rewriting his cellular structure, Ben felt his consciousness expand outward, encompassing new dimensions of PTION while his physical form shifted into something simultaneously solid and ethereal. His skin hardened into iridescent scales that reflected light from frequencies beyond visible spectrum. Wings unfurled from his back, not physical membranes but planes of pure energy that bridged dimensional boundaries. Dimensomorph, Primus supplied. A species that evolved in the spaces between realities. EY perceive the multiverse as a unified whole rather than discrete dimensions. Ben's voice emerged as harmonized tones that existed in multiple frequency ranges simultaneously. This is incredible. He could see the rift not as a single tier but as thousands of microscopic fractures in reality, each leading to a different variant universe. And through one of these fractures, something was emerging. No, someone. A figure stumbled through the rift, surrounded by crackling energy that dissipated as they fell forward onto the vault floor. Human in form, feminine in shape, wreathed in an aura of magenta energy that pulsed with its own rhythmic pattern. Ben moved with inhuman speed, dimensional wings carrying him across the chamber in a heartbeat. He caught the figure before they could collapse completely, supporting their weight with strength that transcended physical limitations. Familiar eyes looked up at him, green like his own, but set in a face that sent shock rippling through his expanded consciousness. "Gwen?" he asked, voice resonating across multiple dimensions. The woman stiffened in his arms, those familiar eyes widening with alarm and confusion. Her hand shot up, nerves splayed in a gesture Ben recognized, a mana manipulation stance, but the energy that gathered around her palm was different from his cousin's. It spiraled with darker undertones, shot through with black filaments that spoke of different magical traditions entirely. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice steady despite her obvious disorientation. "And why do you look like him?" Before Ben could respond, Primus supplied information directly into his consciousness. Dimensional variant. 73% genetic match to Gwendolyn Tennyson from your timeline. Primary divergence point approximately 15 years ago. In her universe, she received the Omnitrix rather than her counterpart to yourself. No familial connection exists between you, your counterpart in her universe was never born. That last piece of information stopped Ben short. "We're not related in your universe," he said aloud, his dimensional form resonating with the strangeness of the concept. The woman, this alternate Gwendolyn, narrowed her eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know you." She glanced around the vault, taking in the alien technology with practiced assessment. "Where am I? This looks like Galvan architecture. But it's not Azimuth's main laboratory." Ben realized he was still holding her and stepped back, allowing her space. As he did, he willed himself back to human form, the Dimensimo. Arf's perceptions folding back into his standard consciousness like a cosmic origami. The transformation reversed in a flash of amber-tinged green light. Gwendolyn's eyes widened as she took in his human appearance. You look like... She trailed off, confusion evident. "In my world, there were records of a Benjamin Tennyson who might have received the Omnitrix, but he died before he was born. His parents were killed in an accident before they could conceive." The information hit Ben like a physical blow. In her world, his parents had never had the chance to become his parents. He stayed there only as a historical footnote, a possibility that never materialized. "Well, in my world, I'm very much alive," Ben replied, finding his footing in the strange conversation. "Ben Tennyson, wielder of the Omnitrix for the past 12 years. And in my universe, you're my cousin Gwen." She processed this with remarkable composure, though her fingers still crackled with defensive energy. "Interdimensional travel. That explains the disorientation." Her gaze sharpened. "But not why I was pulled here against my will." Another tremor ran through the vault, stronger this time. The rift that had admitted Gwendolyn pulsed, expanding fractionally before contracting again. "I think we're about to find out," Ben said, nodding toward the disturbance. "Something's coming through, and I'm guessing it's not friendly." The Annihilari send their vanguard, Primus confirmed in Ben's mind. They sense the activation of the Primordial Matrix and seek to claim its power. Ben relayed this information to Gwendolyn, who listened with increasing concern. The Annihilari. In my universe, they're considered mythological, destroyers from the void between dimensions, eaters of reality itself. Well, they're about to become very non-mythological, Ben replied, turning back to the expanding rift. Can you fight? A smirk crossed Gwendolyn's face that was achingly familiar despite the differences between her and his cousin. Can I fight? Let me show you what the wielder of the Arcana Matrix can do. She raised both hands, the mana energy surrounding them intensifying until it formed complex geometric patterns in the air, magical formulas far more intricate than anything Ben had seen his cousin produce. The energy coalesced into shields that surrounded both of them just as the rift tore wide open. What emerged defied conventional description. It had mass without definite form, presence without substance. Tendrils of absolute void extended into the vault, absorbing light and matter alike. Where they touched, reality itself seemed to dissolve, leaving nothing but empty potential in their wake. Void Harbinger, Primus identified. Scout entity for the Annihilari. It consumes dimensional boundaries to widen paths for larger entities to follow. Any suggestions for fighting something that eats reality? Ben called to Gwendolyn as he cycled through transformation options. She maintained her shield with one hand while gesturing complex patterns with the other. In theory, these entities are vulnerable to concentrated energy that reinforces dimensional constants, magi. C works because it manipulates universal laws directly. Ben nodded, selecting an unfamiliar transformation from the expanded catalog. Then let's try fight fire with fire, or in this case, interdimensional horror with interdimensional horror. The transformation enveloped him in amber-green light. His body elongated, skin hardening into a crystalline substance that refracted light in impossible ways. His consciousness split into 7 simultaneous awareness streams, each perceiving reality from a different dimensional angle. Chronomarion, Primus supplied. Beings that exist partially in the timestream itself. They perceive past, present and potential futures simultaneously. This is getting weirder by the minute. Ben's voice echoed with temporal harmonics as he assessed the Void Harbinger with his expanded senses. The creature registered as a wound in reality's fabric, leaking null energy from a dimension of pure entropy. But with his chronomarion perception, Ben could see something more. The mathematical patterns of its movement, the predictable rhythms of its feeding process, and most importantly, the nexus points where its presence in this reality was most vulnerable. I can see its weak points. Ben called out, voice rippling with echoes from potential futures. If we hit it with synchronized attacks at precise intervals, we can disrupt its dimensional anchoring. Gwendolyn nodded, immediately grasping the strategy. Give me the timing sequence. Ben rattled off a series of numbers that made no conventional sense but translated perfectly to Gwendolyn's magical instincts. Her shields transformed into concentrated beams of mana energy that struck the Void Harbinger in perfect harmony with Ben's own attacks, crystalline time shards that he projected from his elongated limbs. The creature recoiled, its formless mass contracting as their combined assault disrupted its dimensional stability. It emitted no sound, but Ben's expanded consciousness detected rations of something approximating pain or distress. It's working, Gwendolyn called, her face illuminated by the magenta glow of her increasingly complex spell casting. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she maintained the precise timing of her attacks. Ben pushed his new form to its limits, each of his 7 awareness streams calculating attack vectors that would maximize disruption to the creature's dimensional anchoring. The chronomarion form allowed him to perceive microseconds in subjective hours, giving him time to aim each crystalline shard with perfect precision. The Void Harbinger began to retreat, its tendrils withdrawing from objects they had been consuming. But as it contracted toward the rift, Ben's time perception revealed its true strategy. It was condensing, gathering energy for a massive counterattack. It's going to pulse, Ben warned, already moving to intercept. Get down. Gwendolyn reacted instantly, dropping her offensive spell and reinforcing her shields. Ben positioned himself between her and the creature, his crystalline body refracting into 7 temporal echoes that existed simultaneously in slightly different positions. The Harbinger pulsed, releasing a wave of null energy that would erase anything it touched from the timeline itself. But instead of striking Gwendolyn's shields, it collided with Ben's temporal echoes, which absorbed and registered. I booted the energy across multiple potential futures that would never happen, that could safely bear the entropy without affecting the prime timeline. The strain was immense. Ben felt his consciousness fragmenting under the pressure of channeling so much null energy. Warnings flashed through his chronomerian mind: cellular degradation, temporal desynchronization, potential permanent separation from his home timestream. The chronomerian form cannot sustain this energy level, Primus warned. Recommend immediate transformation shift, can't. Yet, Ben managed through gritted teeth. Not until the pulse ends. Gwendolyn saw his struggle and acted decisively. She altered her shields, transforming them into a complex energy construct that resembled a massive spell circle. Ancient symbols rotated around its circumference as she poured more power into it. Hold on, she called to Ben. I'm creating a temporal sink to draw off the null energy. The spell circle expanded until it encompassed both Ben and the contracting pulse wave. Gwendolyn began chanting in a language that predated human civilization, her eyes glowing with power that transcended conventional magic. The symbols on her spell circle responded, absorbing portions of the null energy and converting it into harmless background radiation. The relief was immediate. Ben felt the pressure on his temporal echoes deck. As Gwendolyn's spell redirected the worst of the energy. With newfound stability, he focused his remaining strength on containing and compressing the Void Harbinger itself. His crystalline limbs extended, each temporal echo moving in perfect synchronization to herd the creature back toward the rift. The entity resisted, its void tendrils lashing out with increasing desperation as it sensed defeat approaching. Almost there, Ben gasped, the strain of maintaining his form becoming nearly unbearable. Gwendolyn completed her incantation with a final emphatic syllable that resonated with power. The spell circle contracted suddenly, compressing around the Void Harbinger like a net made of pure magical energy. The creature thrashed wildly as the combined pressure of Ben's temporal manipulation and Gwendolyn's spell forced it back toward the dimensional tier. With a final surge of effort, Ben pushed the contained entity through the rift. The moment it crossed the threshold, Gwendolyn snapped her hands together in a complex gesture, collapsing her spell circle into a sealing matrix that temporarily stabilized the tier. That won't hold forever, she warned, breathing heavily from the exertion. Whatever that thing was, it'll be back with friends. Ben allowed his transformation to revert, collapsing to one knee as he returned to human form. The merged Omnitrix on his wrist pulsed with amber-green light, recalibrating after the strain of maintaining such a powerful new transformation. That, Ben panted, was a Void Harbinger. Apparently they're the advanced scouts for something called the Annihilari. He looked up at Gwendolyn with newfound respect. Nice spellwork, by the way. My cousin's good, but I've never seen her pull off something like that temporal sync. Gwendolyn's expression softened slightly. In my world, I've had to be both the Omnitrix wielder and the magic user. Necessity is a harsh but effective teacher. She extended a hand to help him up. Why? Oh, you handled that new alien form impressively well for a first transformation. Ben accepted the assistance, rising somewhat unsteadily to his feet. Had plenty of practice with new forms over the years. Though I've got to admit, that one was something else entirely. I could see time, actually see it moving around us like currents in water. The chronomerian, Gwendolyn nodded. They're mentioned, in some of the oldest magical texts in my world, beings that exist perpendicular to conventional timelines. She glanced at his wrist. Your Omnitrix looks different from mine. Ben held up his wrist, displaying the modified device. That's because it just merged with something called the Primordial Omnitrix. According to Azimuth, it's the ancestor of the one we're familiar with, created by beings that predated even the Galvan. Gwendolyn's eyes widened. The Primordial Matrix. That's considered a myth even in my universe. She studied the device with evident fascination. The magical potential alone would be incalculable. It's more than just a transformation device now, Ben explained, tapping his temple. There's a consciousness in here called Primus. Say the Primordial Omnitrix was designed to preserve genetic memories of extinct species across multiple dimensions. Not merely preserve, Primus corrected in Ben's mind. To commune, to learn, to ensure that no form of consciousness is ever truly lost to the void. Ben relayed this clarification to Gwendolyn, who listened with increasing interest. That explains why I was pulled through the dimensional rift, she reasoned. If this primordial matrix connects to consciousness across dimensions, activating it probably created a resonance with parallel versions of Omnitrix wielders. Which means, Ben concluded, that we might be getting more unexpected visitors. As if on cue, the sealed rift pulsed again, the magical containment field that Gwendolyn had created straining against increasing pressure from the other side. But this disturbance felt different, not the cold void of the Harbinger, but something else entirely. That's not another Annihilari, Gwendolyn confirmed, her hands already glowing with defensive energy. The dimensional signature is completely different. Ben nodded, readying the Omnitrix again. Friend or foe, I wonder. The answer came moments later as the rift pulsed ONC. More and a new figure emerged, but not through the tear itself. Instead, a swirl of green energy coalesced beside them, forming into a familiar figure in lab coat and goggles. Professor Paradox, Ben greeted with evident relief. Your timing is impeccable, as usual. The Time Walker smiled enigmatically, tipping an imaginary hat. When one exists outside conventional temporal constraints, young Benjamin, timing is simply a matter of perspective. His gaze shifted to Gwendolyn, recognition and curiosity mingling in his expression. Ah, Ms. Tennyson of Earth-2718. How fascinating to see you in this particular timeline. Though I suppose, fascinating, hardly captures the gravity of current circumstances. Gwendolyn regarded him warily. You exist in my universe too, though we've only met twice. During particularly severe timeline disturbances. Indeed, Paradox nodded. I tend to appear when dimensions begin to overlap in potentially catastrophic ways, much like now. He turned his attention to Ben's wrist, eyebrows rising. I see you've acquired the primordial matrix. That complicates matters considerably. Complicates how, exactly? Ben asked, tension creeping into his voice. Azimuth sent me to retrieve it because something called the Annihilari is trying to break through from another dimension. And he was quite right to do so, Paradox confirmed, his perpetual good humor dimming slightly. The Annihilari are indeed attempting to cross over, consumers of reality that have been imprisoned in a void dimension since before recorded history. What Azimuth likely didn't know is that the primordial matrix was originally created as a key component in the system that keeps them imprisoned. Ben and Gwendolyn exchanged alarmed glances. So by removing it from the vault, Ben began. You've potentially accelerated their escape timetable, Paradox finished. Though I should note that their prison was already failing, hence Azimuth's decision to retrieve the matrix in the first place. Better in your hands than theirs. Great, Ben sighed. So I'm carrying around a cosmic prison key that interdimensional monsters want to steal. Tuesday as usual, Paradox smiled faintly at the quip. Your flippancy masks a reasonable assessment of the situation. The primordial matrix is indeed a target, but it's also the most effective weapon against the Annihilari, Particula. RLY now that it has merged with your more stable Omnitrix technology. Gwendolyn frowned thoughtfully. In my world's legends, the Annihilari were sealed away by a coalition of ancient species working together, Celestial Sapiens, Chronosapiens, and others whose names have been lost to history. Quite so, Paradox nodded. And that cooperative effort is precisely what will be needed again, though this time with representatives from multiple dimensions. He gestured to the still pulsing rift. Ms. Tennyson here is merely the first of several counterparts who will be drawn to the primordial matrix's activation. Together, you form a dimensional constant, versions of the same heroic archetype expressed across different timelines. Ben processed this information with remarkable equanimity, having long since grown accustomed to cosmic-scale threats. So we're building a multidimensional team to fight reality-eating monsters. Who else is coming through that rift? That, Paradox replied with his characteristic enigmatic smile, remains to be seen. The primordial matrix will resonate with those most attuned to its unique energy signature, individuals with particular compatibility to its function. As if responding to this explanation, the merged Omnitrix pulsed with amber light, projecting a holographic display unlike anything Ben had seen before. instead of the usual transformation selection interface. It showed what appeared to be a map of interconnected realities, countless parallel dimensions represented as a vast web of light. Dimensional resonance detected, Primus communicated. 2 additional Nexus individuals approaching dimensional boundaries. More company on the way, Ben translated for the others, studying the holographic display. 2 more people are about to cross over. Paradox consulted a pocket watch that definitely wasn't just a pocket watch, his expression turning more serious. I'm afraid I cannot remain to witness their arrival. There are disturbances in other time streams that require my immediate attention. The activation of the Primordial Matrix has created ripple effects across multiple dimensions. Wait, Gwendolyn stepped forward. You can't just leave us with half an explanation about interdimensional invaders. The Time Walker's expression turned apologetic. I understand your frustration, Ms. Tennyson, but there are rules then I must follow regarding direct intervention. Rest assured, I will return when circumstances permit. He turned to Ben. The Primordial Matrix contains knowledge that predates even my considerable experience. Trust Primus, it was designed specifically to counter the threat you now face. Before either of them could protest further, Paradox vanished in another swirl of green energy, leaving them alone with the pulsing dimensional rift. Does he always do that in your universe too? Gwendolyn asked dryly. Pretty much, Ben confirmed with a resigned shrug. You get used to it. The rift expanded suddenly, reality warping around its edges as something, or someone, pushed through from the other side. The dimensional tier widened, edges crystallizing as though freezing in midair. Ben ready. Ed himself for another transformation if needed, while Gwendolyn raised her hands in preparation for either defense or attack. The air grew heavy with potential energy as the rift stabilized into an eye. Regular oval approximately 2 meters high. A figure stepped through, humanoid but definitely not human. Tall and powerfully built, with crimson skin and 4 massive arms, the newcomer wore armor that seemed to be crafted from both metal and stone. Unmistakably female despite her intimidating appearance, she carried herself with the confidence of royalty. Ben recognized her immediately. Looma Red Wind. The Tetraman princess fixed her 4 eyes on Ben, recognition and surprise evident in her expression. Tennyson, how did you pull me across dimensions? Her voice carried the characteristic gravelly undertone of her species, but with the cultured inflections of Tetraman nobility. Before Ben could respond, the rift pulsed again, and a second figure emerged, this one slender and distinctly human in appearance. A young woman with short blonde hair and green eyes, wearing a white and green uniform that bore subtle similarities to the design aesthetics of the Omnitrix. Eunice, Ben breathed, genuinely shocked by her appearance. The Omnitrix avatar looked around in confusion before her gaze settled on Ben. Recognition dawned in her eyes. Ben, what's happening? I was in Azimuth's laboratory on Galvan Prime. And then, she gestured helplessly at the rift behind her, which was already beginning to close now that she had passed through. Ben opened his mouth to attempt an explanation, but the merged Omnitrix on his wrist pulsed with urgent amber light. Dimensional incursion imminent, Primus warned. Void Harbinger returns with reinforcements. As if on cue, the seemingly lost rift tore open again, wider this time, the edges burning with cold fire that consumed reality itself. Tendrils of void energy reached through, more numerous and substantial than the previous encounter. Everyone get ready, Ben called out, instinctively taking command of the situation. That thing is back with friends. Looma Red Wind needed no further explanation. The Tetraman warrior Nexus immediately dropped into a combat stance, all 4 arms flexing as she assessed the dimensional tier. Void entities, she growled. My people have legends of such things. They are vulnerable to concentrated kinetic force applied at their core. Eunice's eyes widened as she took in the situation, but she showed no fear, only determination as her body began to glow with soft green energy. Omnitrix Adaptive Systems Online, she announced, her voice taking on a slightly more mechanical quality. Analyzing interdimensional breach patterns, Gwendolyn moved to stand beside Ben, mana energy already swirling around her hands. 4 of us against who knows how many of them, she muttered. I've had worse odds. Ben couldn't help the smile that tugged at his lips despite the dire circumstances. 4 heroes from different dimensions, brought together by cosmic forces beyond their understanding, facing an enemy that threatened reality itself. Time to be heroes, he said simply, activating the Primordial Omnitrix once more. The vault filled with amber-green light as Ben transformed, his human form giving way to something that combined the best qualities of his previous transformations into something new. His body grew taller, muscles densifying as crystalline armor formed across his torso and limbs. 4 arms emerged, not the raw strength of forearms but the more precise power of a warrior born to combat interdimensional threats. Tetrax Prime, Primus identified. Evolutionary potential fusion drawing from Petrosapian and Tetraman DNA, stabilized by the Primordial Matrix. Now that's what I'm talking about. Ben's voice resonated with new power as he flexed all 4 arms experimentally. Crystal shards formed and dissolved at his will, harder than diamond but responsive as living tissue. Looma stared at him with undisguised amazement. By the 4 moons of Koros, she breathed. You have achieved the Tetraman ideal form, the warrior of legend. There was no time to process this revelation as the void entities surged through the rift in force. 3 harbingers now, flanking a larger, more complex entity that pulsed with malevolent purpose. Void Architect, Primus identified. It reshapes local dimensional constants to facilitate larger breaches. Must be contained or eliminated before it can establish a stable gateway. Gwendolyn, contain the smaller ones. Ben called out, his Tetrax Prime form allowing him to assess battle tactics with enhanced clarity. Looma, you and I take the big one. Eunice, already on it, the Omnitrix avatar replied, her body glowing brighter as she accessed her unique abilities. I can disrupt their dimensional frequency by creating an opposing resonance field. The 4 heroes moved with surprising coordination for individuals who had just met. Gwendolyn unleashed complex spellwork that trapped 2 of the harbingers in a magical containment field. Eunice positioned herself near the rift, her body emanating waves of counter-frequency energy that destabilized the dimensional tear itself. Ben and Looma charged the Void Architect in perfect sync, her 4 arms complementing his own as they unleashed a barrage of physical attacks against the entity. Ben's crystalline limbs formed into blades and hammers that struck with precision, while Looma's raw Tetraman strength delivered devastating impacts that disrupted the creature's cohesion. Strike at the nexus point. Ben called out, his enhanced perception identifying the creature's core. 3 o'clock, just behind that mass of tendrils. Looma needed no further instruction. With a war cry that would have made any Tetraman proud, she leapt high into the air, all 4 arms raised for a hammer blow directed exactly where Ben had indicated. As she descended, Ben fired a barrage of crystal shards that cleared away the protective tendrils, exposing the vulnerable nexus point just in time for Looma's attack to connect. The impact was catastrophic, for the Void Architect. The entity convulsed as its dimensional anchoring destabilized, void matter collapsing inward upon itself. It emitted a silent scream that manifested as ripples of distortion through the surrounding air. It's working, Gwendolyn called from her position, her magical barriers straining against the increasingly desperate attacks of the contained harbingers. But I can't hold these too much longer. Eunice's voice came next, tight with the strain of maintaining her counter-frequency field. The rift is beginning to destabilize, but something else is coming through, something much larger. Ben made a split-second decision, trusting his new team's abilities. Looma, finish the architect. I'm going to help Gwendolyn. The Tetraman princess nodded, continuing her assault on the weakened entity while Ben bounded across the vault with impossible grace. He reached Gwendolyn just as her magical barriers began to fracture under the Harbinger's combined assault. I need about 10 more seconds of containment, he told her, already formulating a plan. Can you hold them that long? Sweat beaded on Gwendolyn's forehead as she poured more power into her failing barriers. Maybe. What's the plan? Instead of answering directly, Ben placed his lower set of hands on her shoulders, crystal formations extending to create a connection between them. Channel your mana through me, he instructed. The Tetrax Prime form can amplify and redirect energy. Understanding dawned in Gwendolyn's eyes. Without hesitation, she altered her spell, directing her magical energy through Ben's crystalline body. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Her magenta mana energy flowing through his crystal structure, amplified and refined until it emerged from his upper arms as concentrated beams of power. Ben directed these beams at the contained harbingers, the combined energy disrupting their very existence at the quantum level. The void entities writhed as their substance began to unravel. Dimensional anchors severed by the precise application of amplified mana. "It's working," Gwendolyn exclaimed, her expression lighting up with fierce joy at their successful cooperation. Across the vault, Looma delivered a final devastating blow to the Void Architect, her four fists striking simultaneously at different points around its nexus. The entity imploded, collapsing into a singularity that winked out of existence with a final pulse of void energy. "Architect neutralized," the Tetraman Princess announced triumphantly. Eunice's voice cut through their momentary victory. "The rift is still expanding. Whatever's coming through, it's almost here." The four heroes regrouped near the dimensional tear, which had grown to nearly fill one wall of the vault despite Eunice's countermeasures. The edges pulsed with increasing frequency, reality itself bending inward as something massive pressed against the boundaries between dimensions. "Any ideas?" Ben asked, looking at his newly assembled team. Gwendolyn studied the rift with professional assessment. "In my universe, we've developed containment spells specifically for dimensional incursions. If I had enough power to cast one, the Primordial Matrix can help with that," Ben offered, his crystalline form still humming with the residual energy from their combined attack. "It can amplify and direct your magic." Looma stepped forward, pounding her four fists together in a Tetraman gesture of resolve. "My people's warriors can generate kinetic force fields through synchronized impact. If timed correctly, it could reinforce a magical barrier." Eunice completed the circle of planning. "And I can modulate the dimensional frequency to create destructive interference with whatever's trying to come through." Ben nodded, feeling a surge of pride in this team that fate had assembled. "Then we have a plan. Gwendolyn, start your spell. Looma, prepare for impact synchronization. Eunice, get as close to the rift as safely possible for maximum effect." A convergence of heroes, Primus observed in Ben's mind. As it was when the Annihilari were first imprisoned. The rift pulsed once more, a massive S-shape becoming visible through the dimensional tear, something that resembled a hand composed of void matter, large enough to crush any of them with casual ease. "Now," Ben commanded, and the four heroes moved as one. Gwendolyn began an incantation in that ancient pre-human language, her hands weaving complex patterns as mana energy formed into a massive containment circle. Ben positioned himself behind her. Four crystalline hands placed at cardinal points around her spell circle, channeling and amplifying the magical energy. Looma took up position at the forefront, all four arms moving in precise patterns as she built up kinetic energy. Eunice stood at the very edge of the rift, her body glowing with increasingly intense counter-frequency waves that disrupted the dimensional tear's stability. The massive void hand reached further into their reality, fingers of absolute nothingness grasping for purchase in their dimension. The temperature in the vault plummeted as entropy itself poured through the breach. "Almost there," Gwendolyn gritted through clenched teeth, her spell circle nearly complete. "Kinetic buildup at maximum," Looma announced, her forearms blurring with stored energy. "Counter-frequency at peak amplitude," Eunice reported, her voice strained but determined. Ben felt the Primordial Matrix pulse in harmony with their combined efforts, the ancient device recognizing and enhancing the pattern of their cooperation. "The convergence is correct," Primus confirmed. "As it was, as it must be." Now," Ben commanded. Four different powers unleashed simultaneously. Gwendolyn completed her spell with a final emphatic syllable, the containment circle expanding to encompass the entire rift. Looma released her built-up kinetic energy in a perfectly synchronous four-arm strike that sent shockwaves of force into the magical barrier, reinforcing it with physical power. Eunice generated a pulse of counter-frequency energy that disrupted the dimensional resonance of the breaching entity. And Ben, drawing on the full power of the Primordial Matrix, channeled their combined energies through his crystalline form, focusing it into a single coherent force directed at the heart of the rift. The result was spectacular. The void hand recoiled as if burned, entropy waves colliding with the reinforced barrier. The dimensional tear began to contract, edges sealing as the combined assault forced it closed from both sides. A howl of frustrated rage echoed through the vault. not a physical sound but a psychic impression of thwarted malevolence that sent shivers down their spines. The massive entity retreated, pulling back through the rapidly closing rift until only darkness remained visible beyond. With a final pulse of combined energy, the four heroes sealed the breach completely. The dimensional tier collapsed in upon itself, reality snapping back into proper alignment with an audible thunderclap of displacing air. For a moment, silence reigned in the vault as they collectively held their breath, waiting to see if their efforts had succeeded. When no new disturbance manifested, Ben allowed his transformation to revert, returning to human form with a flash of amber-green light. "We did it," he breathed, looking at the three women who had fought alongside him with newfound respect and appreciation. Together, Gwendolyn lowered her hands, magical energy dissipating as she allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. That was impressive coordination for a team that just met. The warriors of Koros would sing songs of such a battle, Looma declared, her four arms crossing in a gesture of respect. "You fight with honor, Tennyson, more so than in my dimension." Eunice approached more cautiously, her body still glowing faintly with residual energy. "The rift is sealed for now, but the dimensional barriers remain weakened." This was only the first attempt. Ben nodded, sobering at the reminder that their victory was temporary. "Then we need to prepare for the next one, and figure out why the four of us specifically were brought together. You are the convergence," Primus explained in Ben's mind. "Each of you represents a facet of the power needed to contain the Annihilari. Together, you form a dimensional constant that can oppose their entropy." Ben relayed this information to the others, watching as they processed its implications. Four heroes from different dimensions, brought together by cosmic forces to face a threat beyond any of them individually. "So we're stuck together until this is over," Gwendolyn summarized pragmatically. "Assuming we can even find a way back to our respective dimensions afterward. My father will not be pleased by my extended absence," Looma noted, though she didn't sound particularly concerned. "But the defense of reality takes precedence over royal duties." Eunice looked thoughtful. "Asmith would want me to assist in any way possible. The Omnitrix was designed to preserve and protect life. This mission aligns perfectly with my core purpose." Ben felt the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders, not an unfamiliar burden, but heavier now with the responsive ILITY for heroes from other dimensions added to it. Yet as he looked at the three remarkable women fate had assembled around him, he felt something else too, a sense of rightness, of purpose, of conscience that transcended ordinary teamwork. "Then we're agreed," he said, extending his hand to the center of their circle. "We stand together against the Annihilari, whatever it takes." Gwendolyn placed her hand atop his without hesitation, magenta energy sparking gently between their fingers. "Whatever it takes." Looma added all four of her hands to the stack, her enormous red fingers dwarfing the others but touching with surprising gentleness. "For the honor of all dimensions." Eunice completed the circle, her hand glowing with soft green light as it joined the others. "For life itself." As their hands connected, the primordial matrix pulsed with amber light that spread to encompass them all briefly, a visual manifestation of the bond forming between them. Four heroes from across dimensions, united by fate and choice to stand against the consuming void. "The convergence is complete," Primus confirmed. "The first test is passed." Ben looked at his new team, the alternate Gwendolyn with her complex magic and quiet confidence, Looma Redwind with her warrior's pride and surprising honor, Eunice with her unique connection to life itself, and felt a surge of optimism despite the cosmic threat they faced. "First things first," he said, practical as always. "We need to get out of this vault and somewhere we can plan properly. My home on Earth should be safe enough for now." "Your Earth," Gwendolyn clarified with a small smile. "This is going to get confusing." Ben shrugged with a grin that contained equal parts confidence and self-deprecation, an expression that had become his trademark over years of cosmic adventure. "Welcome to my life. Confusing is pretty much the baseline." As they prepared to leave the vault, Ben caught his reflection in a polished metal surface. His familiar features now marked with subtle lines of amber energy that traced patterns beneath his skin, a visible sign of his bond with the primordial matrix. His eyes, too, had changed, green irises now ringed with that same amber glow. The change has begun, asterisk Primus noted. The bearer becomes the bridge. Asterisk. Ben didn't fully understand what that meant yet, but looking at his 3 new companions, he felt certain of one thing. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. 4 heroes drawn across dimensions, united by a power older than time itself. The Primordial Omnitrix pulsed on his wrist, resonating with the heartbeats of all 4 of them in perfect harmony. The convergence had begun. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Warriors Challenge. The desert air of Bellwood shim. Red with late afternoon heat as Ben led his interdimensional team toward the rusted gates of an abandoned warehouse district. Sweat beaded along his temples, the amber ring pattern beneath his skin pulsing faintly with each heartbeat. 4 days had passed since their convergence in the Galvan Vault, 4 days of uneasy peace while they established a temporary base and attempted to understand their new reality. Your Earth resembles mine in many ways, Gwendolyn observed, magenta energy crackling absently between her fingertips as she studied their surroundings. Unlike Ben's cousin, this ornate version wore her auburn hair cropped short against her neck, practical and severe. A faint scar traced her jawline, evidence of battles Ben had never fought. Though my Bellwood never had this industrial sector. The climatic conditions are barely tolerable, Looma declared, 4 massive arms crossed over her armored chest. The Tetraman princess towered over the others, crimson skin darkening under Earth's yellow sun. Her voice carried the characteristic gravelly undertones of her species, but layered with aristocratic precision. Koros reaches higher temperatures, but maintains appropriate aridity levels. This humidity is offensive. Ben suppressed a smile. Sorry about the weather. Not all of us evolved on desert planets. I find the biological diversity fascinating, Eunice interjected, kneeling to examine a cluster of wildflowers pushing through cracked concrete. Her fingers hovered above the petals, sensory receptors in her artificial skin analyzing their composition without touch. This planet contains 7.77 million documented species, an extraordinary achievement of evolutionary branching. Their diverse reactions to Earth exemplified the strange team fate had assembled. 4 individuals pulled across dimensional boundaries, united by cosmic forces beyond their understanding, yet still fundamentally strangers to one another. Ben approached a seemingly solely wall of corrugated metal and pressed his palm against a hidden panel. The Primordial Omnitrix pulsed once, interface connecting with the security system. Segments of wall retracted silently, revealing a high-tech facility hidden within the decrepit exterior. Home Sweet Temporary Headquarters, Ben announced, gesturing them inside. Courtesy of plumber emergency protocols and some modifications from our resident genius. Eunice ducked her head slightly at the reference. Over the past days, she had transformed the abandoned warehouse into a functional base, her Omnitrix-enhanced intellect purposing salvaged technology with remarkable efficiency. The dimensional stabilizers are maintaining optimal performance, she reported as they entered, lights activating automatically. Our Presson, CE hasn't triggered any further rifts in the local spacetime continuum. The interior belied its dilapidated exterior. A command center hummed with holographic displays monitoring dimensional energies across the planet. Living quarters had been fashioned from modular plumber emergency shelters, and a training area occupied the eastern section, customized for their varied combat styles. Gwendolyn immediately approached the central console, fingers dancing across interfaces as she checked the dimensional scans she'd established. No new incursions detected, she confirmed, the formal cadence of her speech reflecting years of magical scholarship. The Annihilari appear to be regrouping after our previous encounter. Which means we should be preparing, not hiding in this primitive structure, Looma declared, stalking toward the training area with barely contained energy. The princess had grown increasingly restless during their days of research and planning. Warriors ready themselves through combat, not conversation. Ben exchanged a glance with Gwendolyn. The Tetraman's frustration had been building steadily, a warrior culture ill-suited to patience and scientific analysis. Something would need to give soon. The Princess of Koros requires resolution through traditional means, * Primus observed in Ben's mind, the ancient consciousness that inhabited the Primordial Omnitrix. Having grown more conversational over the days since their merger, her cultural imperatives demand physical challenge and honorable confrontation. * I know, Ben murmured aloud, earning curious glances from Eunice and Gwendolyn. He'd grown accustomed to these internal conversations, though explaining them to the others remained awkward. Just trying to figure out the right approach. He followed Looma into the training area, watching as she systematically demolished a series of reinforced combat drones. Each powerful strike demonstrated perfect Tetraman form, all four arms working in synchronized devastation. Her movements economical despite her massive frame. There was an undeniable beauty to her combat style, a deadly poetry written in shattered metal and hydraulic fluid. "Your facilities are inadequate," she declared without turning, somehow sensing his presence. "These constructs provide no meaningful resistance." "They're not designed to," Ben replied, leaning against the doorframe. "We're trying to maintain a low profile until we better understand what we're facing." Looma turned then, four eyes narrowing as she studied him. "In my dimension, you were not so cautious." He Ben Tennyson I knew sought battle eagerly, perhaps too eagerly. That piqued his curiosity. "We've met in your universe." A complex expression crossed her crimson features, something between amusement and irritation. "Met. We were betrothed." Ben choked on nothing, straightening abruptly. "We were what?" "Betrothed," she repeated, as though explaining to a particularly slow child. "You defeated my father in honorable combat, thus claiming my hand according to Tetraman tradition. Though you later proved unworthy." The dismissive tone carried unmistakable bitterness. Ben processed this revelation with growing discomfort, remembering his own universe's brief entanglement with Looma and her father, a misunderstanding he'd narrowly escaped. "What did he do?" Ben asked cautiously. "The other me." Looma's upper arms crossed while her lower pair clenched into massive fists. "He sent a subordinate to face me in the traditional pre-wedding combat ritual. A cowardly substitution that violated sacred tradition and brought shame upon both our houses." Ben winced. That sounded depressingly plausible for his teenage self, finding clever workarounds rather than confronting issues directly. He'd like to think he'd matured beyond such tactics, but the echo of his past choices resonated uncomfortably. "I'm sorry," he offered, the words inadequate but sincere. "That wasn't honorable." Looma studied him with all four eyes, searching for deception. Finding none, her posture shifted subtly. "You are not him," she acknowledged. "Yet you bear his face and name. It complicates matters." An idea formed in Ben's mind, perhaps reckless, but potentially necessary for their team's cohesion. "In your culture, how would such a dishonor be addressed?" "Through combat," she answered immediately, a spark of interest lighting her features. "The dishonored party would issue formal challenge. Victory would restore honor. Defeat would confirm unworthiness." Ben nodded slowly, feeling Muse stir in his consciousness with approval. "Then perhaps that's what we need to do." Looma blinked all four eyes in succession, a Tetraman expression of surprise. "You would accept my challenge?" "Even knowing you represent a different version of the one who wronged me." "I'm not responsible for what another Ben did," he clarified, "but I do need your full commitment to this team. If settling is matter through traditional combat helps secure that, then yes, I accept your challenge." A slow smile spread across Looma's face, transforming her stern features. For the first time since their meeting, genuine respect entered her expression. "Perhaps you are worthy of the Primordial Matrix after all, Ben Tennyson." She straightened to her full impressive height, then performed a formal tetram. "And salute." Right upper arm crossed over her chest, left upper arm extended, both lower arms forming protective stance. "I, Looma Red Wind, Princess of the House of Wind and heir to the throne of Koros, do formally challenge you to Trivacor, the contest of worthy intent." The formal declaration hung in the air between them, weighted with cultural significance Ben only partially understood. The Primordial Omnitrix pulsed warmly against his skin, Primus supplying contextual understanding that filtered into Ben's consciousness. Trivacor represents more than simple combat, the ancient entity explained. It is a ritualized negotiation of relationship and status, traditionally conducted between potential mates or alliance partners. By accepting, you acknowledge the legitimacy of her grievance, while asserting your own worth as an equal. Great, Ben muttered under his breath. "No pressure." Louder, with appropriate formality, he responded. "I, Ben Tennyson, bearer of the Primordial Matrix, Accept your challenge of Trivacor. Name your terms. 3 trials, Looma declared, satisfaction evident in her voice. Strength, strategy, and spirit, the traditional measures of Tetraman worthiness. We begin at dawn tomorrow. Wait, Gwendolyn's voice interrupted from the doorway, where she and Eunice had apparently been observing the exchange. We have interdimensional invaders to prepare for. And you're scheduling some sort of alien gladiatorial contest. Looma turned all 4 eyes toward the magic user, expression hardening. This is not entertainment, wielder of arcana. This is necessary cultural resolution. Her voice carried the unmistakable weight of royal command. Without establishing proper hierarchical relationships, our team cohesion remains compromised. She's right, Ben interjected before Gwendolyn could respond. We need to function as a unit, not 4 individuals with unresolved tensions. If Tetraman tradition offers a structured way to address those tensions, we should respect that. Eunice stepped forward, her analytical mind already processing implications. The challenge could actually provide valuable data on our combat compatibility and team dynamics, she offered pragmatically. Additionally, the Primordial Matrix appears to be responding positively to the proposal. She nodded toward Ben's wrist, where the device pulsed with steady amber green light, more stable than they'd seen since its activation. Gwendolyn considered this, pragmatism ultimately overriding objection. Fine, but we conduct these trials with appropriate safety protocols. And we continue monitoring for dimensional incursions. Agreed, Looma nodded formally. The honor of Trivacor requires witnesses and safeguards. I have no desire to permanently harm the bearer of the Primordial Matrix. That's reassuring, Ben commented dryly. So, dawn tomorrow. What should I expect for the first trial? Preparation is part of the challenge, Looma replied with a predatory smile. Rest well, Ben Tennyson. You will need your strength. With that, she strode from the training area, regal posture communicating absolute confidence. As the door slid shut behind her, Ben exhaled slowly. That went better than expected, he mused. Better. Gwendolyn arched an eyebrow skeptically. You just agreed to 3 potentially lethal challenges against a warrior FR. A species 4 times stronger than humans. 7.8 times, accounting for differences in muscle density and skeletal reinforcement, Eunice corrected automatically. Though the Primordial Matrix significantly alters those calculations. Ben flexed his fingers, watching as faint amber energy traced patterns beneath his skin. Since merging with the ancient device, his baseline human form had exhibited subtle enhancements, increased strength, accelerated healing, heightened sensory perception. Nothing approaching Tetraman capabilities, but definitely beyond ordinary human limits. I'm counting on that, he admitted. Plus, this isn't about winning through superior force. It's about earning respect. Gwendolyn studied him with newfound interest. You've matured since we met. 4 days is a long time, Ben joked. Then more seriously, the Primordial Matrix is changing me. Not just physically. I'm accessing memories, instincts, cultural understanding from thousands of species across multiple dimensions. Cognitive integration with the primordial consciousness, Eunice nodded with scientific fascination. Fascinating. The original Omnitrix merely sampled DNA, while this appears to incorporate complete experiential matrices. It's more than data, Ben tried to explain, struggling to articulate the profound difference. It's like having lived countless lives simultaneously. I'm still me, but with expanded perspective. Gwendolyn's expression softened slightly. Just be careful that expanded perspective doesn't lead to expanded ego. Power changes people, even well-intentioned ones. The warning struck closer to home than she could know. Ben had witnessed firsthand how power corrupted Vilgax, Egregor, Maltruant, even alternate versions of himself like Ben 10. Before he'd corrected course. The Primordial Matrix represented power beyond anything they'd previously encountered. I'll keep that in mind, he promised, glancing toward the door where Looma had exited. In the meantime, I should probably study up on Tetraman combat traditions before tomorrow. I can help with that, Eunice offered. The Omnitrix database contains extensive cultural information. Though I suspect the Primordial Matrix already has what you need. She was right. As Ben focused his thoughts, Primus obligingly surfaced relevant knowledge, centuries of Tetraman ritual combat protocols. Strategic analyses of famous Trivacor contests, physiological weaknesses rarely exploited by off-world challengers. The information flowed not as dry data but as lived experience, complete with emotional context and cultural nuance. Yeah, Ben acknowledged, but I still appreciate the offer. 2 perspectives are better than 1. As night fell over their makeshift base, Ben found himself alone on the roof, watching stars emerge above Bellwood's urban glow. The familiar constellations offered strange comfort, proof that despite interdimensional threats and cosmic transformations, some constants remained. The Princess of Koros presents valuable opportunity, Primus observed, the ancient consciousness having grown increasingly conversational as their integration deepened. Traditional Tetraman bonding rituals establish neurological synchronization beneficial for combat partnerships. Is that why you're encouraging this challenge? Ben asked aloud, comfortable in the privacy of solitude. To create some kind of mental link with Looma. Simplistic interpretation, but essentially correct. The convergence requires harmonic resonance between all 4 Nexus individuals. The Tetraman represents physical power and warrior discipline, aspects requiring formal integration protocols. Ben processed this with growing suspicion. Are you saying you Delibera? Telly brought Looma here because of her unresolved history with my alternate self? That this whole challenge was inevitable? The primordial matrix pulsed warmly against his skin, neither confirming nor denying. The Annihilari cannot be defeated through technological or magical means alone. Victory requires complete dimensional resonance across multiple archetypal expressions. The warrior princess represents essential frequency. You could just say, yes, Ben muttered, though he was beginning to understand the ancient entity's circuitous communication style. Primus existed outside linear thought, experiencing past, present, future simultaneously across multiple dimensions. Direct answers weren't in its nature. The roof access door slid open behind him, interrupting the conversation. Ben turned to find Eunice approaching, her white and green uniform ghostly in the moonlight. I hope I'm not intruding, she said softly, the artificial origin of her existence betrayed only by the too perfect modulation of her voice. My sensors detected elevated brain activity patterns consistent with internal dialogue. Ben smiled wryly. Just chatting with my new roommate. He tapped his temple. Primus has opinions about tomorrow's challenge. Eunice settled beside him, legs dangling over the edge of the roof with casual disregard for the 4-story drop. As a Omnitrix avatar, her physica L form combined human appearance with significantly enhanced capabilities, strength, reflexes, and processing power far beyond human norms. The primordial consciousness represents the oldest known artificial intelligence in recorded history, she observed with evident fascination. Azimuth created me as an adaptive system capable of limited evolution, but Primus appears to have achieved true sentience millennia ago. I don't think Primus was ever exactly artificial, Ben replied, searching for words to describe the entity sharing his consciousness. It feels more like a natural phenomenon that achieved self-awareness. Like if a river developed a mind. Eunice nodded, accepting the metaphor. While you were training, I analyzed the molecular structure of the merged Omnitrix. The mater IAL appears to be a living matrix, simultaneously technological and biological, with properties that violate conventional physics. That tracks with how it feels, Ben confirmed, watching amber energy trace patterns beneath his skin. Less like wearing a device, more like having another circulatory system. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching distant aircraft traverse the night sky. Despite her artificial origins, Eunice radiated a distinctly human warmth, curiosity, compassion, and subtle humor that transcended her created nature. May I ask a personal question? She ventured eventually. Sure. Do you fear the integration? With Primus, I mean. Her green eyes reflected genuine concern. As a consciousness originally designed to exist within a matrix rather than a biological form, I understand the complexity of merged existence. The question struck deeper than Ben had anticipated. Truth was, he'd been too busy responding to immediate crises to fully process the profound change occurring within him. The primordial matrix wasn't just a tool or weapon, it was becoming part of his fundamental identity. I'm not sure. Fear is the right word, he answered slowly. Honest in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. It's more like standing at the edge of an ocean, knowing you're going to dive in but not how deep it goes. There's wonder and uncertainty all mixed together. Eunice smiled, the expression lighting her features with genuine warmth. A poetic response. The Ben I knew in my dimension would have deflected with humor. Don't worry, I've still got plenty of bad jokes in reserve, Ben assured her with a grin. Just saving them for when morale gets really low. Their laughter mingled in the night air, a moment of simple connection amid cosmic complexity. As it faded, Ben found himself studying Eunice with renewed curiosity. What was I like, in your dimension? Her expression grew thoughtful, younger, more impulsive, brilliant, in crisis but sometimes careless with emotions, his and others. A soft smile curved her lips. But kind, always kind, even when it cost him. The description stung with its accuracy, a mirror reflecting both his better nature and familiar flaws. Sounds about right. You're different, though, Eunice continued, head tilted analytically. More centered. The Primordial Matrix chose well. Before Ben could respond to this unexpected compliment, the security system chimed softly, alerting them to movement on the perimeter. Both immediately tensed, ready for potential threat. Eastern Quadrant, Eunice reported, eyes unfocusing slightly as she accessed the base's systems remotely. Single humanoid figure, approaching deliberately, not attempting concealment. Ben activated the Omnitrix interface, cycling through transformation options as they moved toward the access door. Friend or foe? Unknown. Physiological readings are unusual, not matching any standard profile. They descended quickly to the command center, where Gwendolyn was already reviewing security footage, magenta energy crackling around her fingers in readiness. The main screen showed thermal imaging of a slender figure approaching their hidden entrance with confident strides. Definitely not human, Gwendolyn assessed, manipulating the image to enhance details. Bipedal but moving with inhuman grace. Energy. Signature suggests technological augmentation. Where's Looma? Ben asked, noticing the Tetraman's absence. Meditation chamber. I've alerted her. The security feed shifted as external cameras tracked the visitor's approach. As they reached the concealed entrance, the figure paused, head tilting upward as though looking directly into the hidden camera. A hand raised in explicit greeting, Fu. Our fingers spread in what appeared to be a deliberate peace sign. They know we're watching, Eunice observed unnecessarily. Ben studied the figure with growing suspicion. Something about the deliberate posture, the calculated approach. They want to be invited in. As if confirming his assessment, the figure reached into a pocket and removed what appeared to be a plumber badge, holding it up for clear visibility. The insignia gleamed authentically in the moonlight, though the design differed subtly from standard issue. Alternate dimension plumber, Gwendolyn suggested. Or excellent forgery, Eunice countered. The heavy tread of Tetraman footsteps announced Looma's arrival. She took in the situation with a quick glance at the monitors. Spring the trap, she declared confidently. 4 against 1 presents acceptable odds. Ben considered their options. The visitor had made no aggressive moves, deliberately announced their presence, and carried what appeared to be valid credentials. Yet caution had kept him alive through years of extraterrestrial encounters. I'll meet them outside, he decided. The rest of you stay ready, but out of sight unless needed. Unacceptable risk profile, Eunice protested immediately. Agreed, Gwendolyn added. We function as a team or not at all. Looma crossed all 4 arms stubbornly. The bearer of the Primordial Matrix should face unknown entities without proper protection. Their unified opposition took Ben by surprise, and warmed something in him he hadn't realized had grown cold. These dimensional counterparts barely knew him, yet showed concern for his safety with remarkable conviction. All right, he conceded, compromise. I'll make initial contact with Eunice as backup. Gwendolyn maintains surveillance with defensive spells ready, and Looma provides heavy response if things go sideways. The plan satisfied no one completely, the mark of a good compromise, but they nodded acceptance. Minutes later, Ben and Eunice approached the concealed entrance. The others positioned strategically throughout the compound. Ready? Ben asked, hand hovering over the door release. Eunice nodded, her gentle demeanor replaced by focused alertness. Omnitrix defensive protocols active. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing their visitor in person rather than through surveillance filters. The figure stood relaxed but alert, Humanoid. Female in appearance, with striking blue-black hair that seemed to absorb rather than reflect moonlight. Her attire combined elements of plumber uniform with personalized modifications suggesting extensive field experience. Most remarkable were her eyes. Solid violet without discernible pupil or sclera, yet expressing clear intelligence and assessment as they took in Ben and Eunice. Benjamin Tennyson, she greeted, voice melodic with an accent impossible to place. Bearer of the Primordial Matrix. Your dimensional signature is distinctive. You have me at a disadvantage, Ben replied cautiously. The Omnitrix humming with heightened awareness against his skin. A smile curved the visitor's lips. Many names across many worlds, but you may call me Siren. I serve the Interdimensional Monitoring Corps, a peacekeeping organization that exists between realities rather than within any single one. Truth. Primus confirmed unexpectedly in Ben's mind. The IMC predates Galvan interstellar civilization. They observe and maintain dimensional boundaries. Ben relaxed fractionally, though maintained cautious readiness. That's a pretty convenient organization to represent. Given our current situation, convenience implies coincidence, Siren replied smoothly. This is necessity, not chance. The activation of the primordial matrix registered across 17-dimensional planes simultaneously. I've been tasked with assessment and advisory functions. Eunice spoke for the first time, her analytical mind processing implications. You're saying your organization anticipated this event? Quote, not precisely anticipated, Siren clarified. Monitored for. The prison dimensions containing the Annihilari have shown incremental degradation for centuries. The retrieval and activation of the primordial matrix represents expected escalation. Ben exchanged glances with Eunice, mutual wariness tempered by pragmatic acceptance of their limited knowledge. Maybe we should continue this conversation inside, he suggested, making a calculated decision to extend provisional trust. The command center's atmosphere crackled with tension as Siren was introduced to Gwendolyn and Looma. The Tetraman princess particularly radiated suspicion, all four arms remaining conspicuously near her weapons as the visitor explained her purpose in greater detail. The Interdimensional Monitoring Corps maintains balance between realities, Siren elaborated, seemingly comfortable despite the hostile reception. We observe but rarely intervene directly, except in cases of Class Omega threats. The Annihilari qualify emphatically. Convenient that you appear only after we've already faced 2 incursions, Gwendolyn noted skeptically, magenta energy still dancing between her fingertips. Siren inclined her head, acknowledging the legitimate suspicion. Protocol dictates observation before contact. Your team handled the initial incursions impressively. Why? Confirming the primordial matrix chose its bearer and associated nexus individuals correctly. Chose. Ben repeated, focusing on the revealing word choice. You're saying the matrix deliberately selected each of us? Of course, Siren replied, violet eyes shifting to each team member in turn. The warrior, the scholar, the adapter, and the bridge. 4 archetypal energies necessary to counter the Annihilari's dimensional disruption. The team exchanged glances, processing this confirmation of what Primus had implied but never stated directly. Their assembly wasn't coincidence or random chance, but deliberate selection across dimensional boundaries. If you knew this would happen, Looma challenged, stepping forward imposingly, why not prevent the prison's degradation before crisis point? Siren met the Tetraman's 4-eyed glare without flinching. The dimensional boundaries were created by entities beyond even our understanding. We can monitor but not repair their work, only respond when breaches occur. Convenient limitations, Gwendolyn muttered. But logical ones, Eunice countered thoughtfully. If these prison dimensions were created by beings powerful enough to contain the Annihilari originally, their technology or methods might well exceed current understanding. Ben had remained silent, allowing the exchange while Primus sifted through ancestral memories. The ancient consciousness confirms Siren's claims about the IMC, providing fragmented historical context that spanned millions of years across multiple dimensions. All right, he finally interjected, drawing all eyes. Let's assume everything you've said is true. Why come to us now? What exactly does the IMC want? Siren's expression grew more serious. To warn you, the incursions they experienced were merely preliminary assessments, the Annihilari testing dimensional weaknesses. Their next attempt will be coordinated and substantial. When? Looma demanded bluntly. Soon. Within your planet's rotational cycle. Siren produced a small device from her uniform, a crystalline hexagon that projected a holographic display of Earth surrounded by glowing fracture lines in spacetime. They've identified 17 potential breach points, concentrated around locations of significant dimensional instability. Eunice leaned forward, analyzing the projection with rapid calculations. These correspond to sites of previous extraterrestrial activity or temporal anomalies. Precisely, Siren confirmed, places where reality has already been stretched thin. The Bellwood Null Zone, she indicated their current location, represents their primary target due to concentrated dimensional scarring from previous incidents. So they're coming here, Ben summarized grimly. To our doorstep, yes, but not merely to attack, to retrieve. Siren's violet eyes fixed on Ben's wrist. The Primordial Matrix represents both key and lock to their prison dimension. Possessing it would allow them to free their entire collective. The implications hung heavy in the air, their small team standing between reality itself and entities that consumed dimensions whole. The responsibility, why would have seemed absurd mere weeks ago, but now felt grimly inevitable. We need to prepare, Gwendolyn stated, pragmatic as always. Fortify our position, establish defensive parameters. Insufficient strategy, Looma countered immediately. Warriors do not await siege. We should identify the weakest potential breach point and establish offensive position. As the team debated tactical approaches, Ben studied Siren with newfound perspective. The IMC representative observed their discussion with subtle approval, as though their disagreement represented expected process rather than dysfunction. She tests group dynamics, Primus noted. The interdimensional monitors evaluate harmonic potential between Nexus individuals. Asterisk. You're assessing us, Ben stated flatly, interrupting the tactical debate. This isn't just a warning visit, it's an evaluation. Siren's lips curved in acknowledgement. Perceptive. Yes, the IMC must determine if this convergence has stabilization potential or requires alternative intervention. Meaning what, exactly? Gwendolyn demanded, tension sharpening her tone. The Annihilari cannot be allowed to escape their prison dimension, Siren replied with simple finality. If your team proves inadequate to prevent this, more drastic measures would be implemented. Such as, Eunice pressed, dimensional cauterization, came the matter-of-fact response. Severing this reality branch entirely to prevent cross-contamination. The clinical description couldn't mask the horrific implication, sacrificing an entire universe to save the broader multiverse. Billions of lives extinguished as acceptable collateral damage. That's not happening, Ben stated with quiet certainty, ember energy flaring visibly beneath his skin as the Primordial Matrix responded to his emotional state. We'll stop the Annihilari without sacrificing this dimension or any other. Siren studied him with unreadable violet eyes. The conviction is admirable, the implementation remains unproven. Then help us prove it, Ben challenged. If the IMC genuinely wants this threat contained, provide actual assistance instead of cryptic warnings and thinly veiled threats. For the first time, Siren's composed demeanor showed a crack, something like surprise or perhaps respect flickering across alien features. Direct approach, unexpected but efficient, she nodded decisively. Very well, the IMC can provide dimensional stabilization technology to reinforce your defensive position. Additionally, I am authorized to share tactical information regarding Annihilari vulnerabilities. The team exchanged cautiously optimistic glances at this unexpected cooperation. Looma, however, remained skeptical. What assurance have we that your technology won't see MPLY monitor our efforts for your evaluation purposes? The Tetraman princess demanded. None whatsoever, Siren replied with disarming honesty. The monitoring will occur regardless. The technology, however, provides genuine protection against dimensional breaches. We'll take it, Ben decided, weighing calculated risk against certain threat. But we'll have Eunice examine everything before implementation. Siren inclined her head in acceptance. A reasonable precaution. As the conversation shifted toward technical specifications and defensive preparations, Ben found himself drawn toward the base's observation window. Outside, dawn approached, the horizon lightening incrementally toward what promised to be another scorching Bellwood day. Dawn. The appointed time for Looma's first challenge. The Tetraman princess apparently shared his realization, approaching with heavy tread that announced her presence deliberately. The arrival of this interdimensional monitor changes circumstances. She acknowledged reluctantly. The Trivacor may need postponement. Ben considered this reasonable offer, weighing team priorities against cultural significance. The impending Annihila re-incursion clearly represented more urgent threat than resolving personal honor between dimensions. The challenge and the coming battle are not separate matters, Primus counseled unexpectedly. The Tetraman warrior's full commitment requires cultural resolution. Harmonic resonance between Nexus individuals remains essential to victory. Understanding crystallized in Ben's mind, their FXT. Vanessa against the Annihilari directly correlated to their cohesion as a team. Looma's challenge represented necessary foundation rather than distraction. We proceed as planned, he decided firmly. The first trial at dawn, as agreed. Surprise registered across Looma's features, followed by unmistakable approval. You understand more of Tetraman ways than expected, Ben Tennyson. Learning fast, he acknowledged with a half smile. One benefit of having an ancient interdimensional consciousness as a roommate. As the eastern sky blushed with approaching daylight, the team relocated to the warehouse's expansive central chamber. Gwendolyn established magical wards around the perimeter, both for privacy from potential observers and containment of any excessive force. Eunice configured monitoring systems to alert them of dimensional disturbances, while Siren observed from a respectful distance, violet eyes missing nothing. Looma stood at the chamber's center, resplendent in formal Tetraman combat attire. She had exchanged her practical armor for traditional regalia, burnished plates adorned with House of Wind insignia, ceremonial bracers bearing family lineage markings, and a crimson cape that emphasized her royal status. The effect transformed her from merely imposing to truly majestic. The Trivacor begins with the trial of strength, she announced formally, voice carrying the weight of centuries-old tradition. This is not merely physical contest, but demonstration of one's capacity to endure, to persist, to overcome through force of will as much as muscle. Ben approached the circle Gwendolyn had inscribed on the floor, a neutral boundary within which the challenge would be contained. He wore simple training attire, having decided against transformation for this initial trial. Whatever test Looma had devised, he would face it first as himself. I am ready, he stated, matching her formal tone. Looma nodded, then clapped her upper hands together in ceremonial commencement. From recessed panels in the floor rose a massive stone monolith, roughly cylindrical and carved with ancient Tetraman glyphs. It stood nearly 3 meters tall and radiated density that suggested extraordinary weight. The Pillar of Endurance, Looma identified, imported from the sacred quarries of Koros itself, composed of neutron-dense granite with core of compressed dwarf star matter. Ben blinked, reassessing the seemingly simple stone column with newfound respect. That thing must weigh approximately 47 Earth tons, Eunice supplied from the sidelines, sensors clearly active. Though its effective mass fluctuates due to the dwarf star material's quantum instability. The trial is simple, Looma continued, ignoring the interruption. Each contestant, NT must lift and hold the pillar overhead for as long as possible. The one who endures longest demonstrates superior strength of body and will. Ben eyed the monolith skeptically. Even with the Primordial Matrix's enhancements to his human form, lifting 47 tons seemed flatly impossible without transformation. Are transformations permitted? He asked, already knowing the answer. No, Looma confirmed without hesitation. The trial of strength must be faced in one's natural form. Tetraman tradition demands authentic measurement of innate capability. She tests not merely physical strength, but understanding of fundamental principles, Primus observed cryptically. Remember, strength manifests in many forms. Helpful as always, Ben muttered under his breath. Looma approached the monolith with ceremonial reverence, positioning herself at its base. With fluid grace belying her massive frame, she bent, wrapped all 4 arms around the pillar's circumference, and heaved upward. The stone rose smoothly as she straightened, massive muscles flexing beneath crimson skin until she held it overhead triumphantly. The weight is borne by body and spirit together, she declared. Voice unstrained despite the phenomenal burden. I will maintain this position until you have demonstrated your attempt, regardless of duration. Ben approached the challenge with outward confidence masking internal doubt. Physically, the task seemed impossible. His enhanced human form might manage 2 or 3 tons at maximum exertion, nowhere near the Pilar's actual mass. Yet something Abu Looma's wording nagged at him. The weight is borne by body and spirit together. Not merely a test of muscle, but something more fundamental. As he positioned himself where Looma had stood, Ben focused inward, connecting more deliberately with the Primordial Matrix's consciousness. A little guidance would be helpful right about now. The Princess of Koros does not expect physical superiority, Primus replied. She measures understanding of Tetraman philosophical principles. The pillar represents burden of leadership and responsibility, concepts central to warrior culture. Ben processed this insight while studying the monolith's ancient inscriptions. The glyphs pulsed faintly with embedded energy, not technological but something more primal. As he traced their patterns with his gaze, recognition sparked through the Primordial Matrix's shared consciousness. Gravitational resonance formulae, he murmured, understanding dawning. The inscriptions aren't decorative, they're mathematical. With newfound perception, Ben placed his hands against the Pilar's surface, fingers aligning with specific glyphs. The stone felt alive beneath his touch, responsive to the amber energy that now flowed visibly beneath his skin. He closed his eyes, focusing on the mathematical patterns encoded in ancient Tetraman symbols, allowing the Primordial Matrix to guide his understanding. The fundamental principle revealed itself with elegant simplicity. The Pilar's weight existed as variable rather than constant. Its mass responded to the bearer's understanding of gravitational harmonics, essentially. Belief made manifest through specific focus. A Tetraman warrior learned this principle through years of cultural indoctrination. Ben accessed it through the Primordial Matrix's ancestral memory. With deliberate intent, Ben engaged this knowledge. Amber energy flowed from his fingertips into the ancient glyphs, activating dormant patterns. The Pilar's effective mass shifted in response, not physically lighter, but differently aligned with gravitational forces. He lifted, muscles straining but not impossibly so. The monolith rose smoothly as he straightened, heavy but manageable, as he positioned it overhead in perfect mimicry of Looma's stance. The weight is borne by body and spirit together, he recited, understanding the words, true meaning now. Strength flows from perception as much as physiology. Across the chamber, Looma's 4 eyes widened in genuine surprise, though she maintained her perfect form beneath her own burden. You decipher the teaching correctly, Ben Tennyson. Few off-worlders grasped the principle so quickly. From the sidelines, Gwendolyn and Eunice watched with varying degrees of comprehension. The magician recognized kindred principles to our own arcane practice, reality responding to focused will and precise formula. The Omnitrix avatar's sensors detected the gravitational anomalies but struggled to quantify the interaction between consciousness and physical law. Siren observed with particular intensity, violet eyes unblinking as she documented the exchange. Minutes passed in silent demonstration as both contestants maintained their burdens overhead. Sweat beaded on Ben's forehead, muscles trembling with genuine exertion despite the gravitational manipulation. The pillar remained objectively massive, merely made manageable aligned perception rather than truly lightened. 10 minutes extended to 20, then 30. Ben's arms burned with fatigue, shoulders threatening cramping as lactic acid accumulated in overworked muscles. Across from him, Looma showed minimal strain, Tetraman physiology naturally superior for sustained load bearing. You may concede honorably, she offered after 40 minutes had elapsed. You have demonstrated remarkable endurance for your species. Ben gritted his teeth, shifting his stance slightly to redistribute the burden. Not ready to quit just yet. The statement carried more than mere stubbornness. Through the Primordial Matrix's perception, Ben recognized this challenge as fundamentally about perseverance rather than raw capability. Looma would naturally outlast him. Physically, the test measured willingness to continue despite certain eventual defeat. 50 minutes. 60. Ben's muscles screamed for relief, vision beginning to blur at the edges as blood pounded in his temples. The amber energy beneath his skin pulsed erratically, maintaining gravitational harmonics despite increasing biological strain. At precisely 73 minutes, Looma made her move. With ceremonial precision, she lowered her pillar to the ground, placing it with deliberate care rather than dropping despite her obvious capability to continue. "I yield," she declared formally. Shock rippled through the observers. Ben maintained his stance through sheer stubborn determination, confusion warring with exhaustion. "What?" he managed through gritted teeth. "I yield the trial," Looma repeated, approaching him with measured steps. "Lower your burden, Ben Tennyson. You have proven your point." With careful movement, Ben lowered the monolith to the floor, muscles trembling violently as tension released. He straightened with effort, meeting Looma's four-eyed gaze with questioning expression. "I don't understand," he admitted honestly. "You could have continued longer." "Of course," she acknowledged without false modesty. "Tetraman physiology guarantees superior endurance for static load bearing. Victory through such natural advantage would prove nothing of value." Then what was the actual test? A smile curved Looma's features, respect mingled with something warmer. Understanding, perseverance, willingness to embrace Tetraman principles rather than rely solely on transformation powers. She gestured to the pillar. "You identified the gravitational harmonics without instruction, adapted to Tetraman philosophical concepts instinctively, and persisted beyond reasonable expectation for your species." She extended her upper right hand, the formal gesture of acknowledgement between Tetraman warriors. "The trial measures worthy character, not merely physical capacity. You have demonstrated the former abundantly." Ben accepted the gesture, clasping forearms in traditional fashion. The simple contact conveyed more than words, mutual respect established between dimensional counterparts. Cultural barriers bridged through shared understanding. "I still don't think I actually won," he noted wryly. "Trivacor isn't about winning or losing," Looma corrected, surprising him with philosophical depth beneath her warrior exterior. "It measures compatible worth between potential allies, or mates." A hint of amusement colored her tone at his involuntary expression. "The purpose is harmonization, not dominance." The primordial matrix pulsed warmly against Ben's skin, conveying Primus's satisfaction with this exchange. The first harmonic established. The warrior acknowledges the bridge. As they moved away from the challenge circle, Gwendolyn approached with a water container and towel. "Impressive endurance," she acknowledged, no longer challenging the ritual's relevance. "Though I'm curious about the gravitational manipulation, similar principles to certain levitation spells, but achieved through different means. The primordial matrix continues facilitating cross-disciplinary knowledge transfer," Eunice observed clinically, though her expression conveyed genuine admiration. "Fascinating integration rate." Ben accepted the water gratefully, muscles still trembling from exertion. "Don't get too impressed yet. That was just the first trial, and apparently the most straightforward." Looma confirmed this assessment with predatory smile. "The trial of strategy commences at midday. I suggest rest and recovery before then." Before Ben could respond, alarm klaxons blared throughout the facility. Eunice immediately accessed the monitoring systems, expression shifting to urgent focus. "Dimensional breach detected," she reported tersely. 17 kilometers northeast, precisely as Siren predicted. "The Annihilari begin their coordinated incursion." Siren confirmed, violet eyes narrowing. Earlier than anticipated, Ben exchanged glances with Looma, mutual understanding passing between them without words. The Trivacor would wait. Immediate threat took precedence. "Looks like your trial of strategy just got practical application," he noted grimly. The Tetraman princess nodded, already moving toward her combat gear. "Theory tested in battle, the truest measure of worth." As the team mobilized with practiced efficiency, Ben felt the primordial matrix pulse with increasing urgency against his skin. The ancient device resonated with anticipation, as though events proceeded according to some predetermined pattern. "The convergence accelerates," Primus confirmed cryptically. "Adversity forges stronger harmonic bonds than controlled testing." "You almost sound pleased about the timing," Ben muttered as he checked the Omnitrix interface, cycling through transformation options with practiced precision. "Dimensional constants align as they must," came the enigmatic reply. "The Warrior's Challenge and the Annihilari Incursion represent complementary rather than competing priorities." Ben filed that cryptic assessment away for later consideration as the team assembled at the command center. Gwendolyn's hands already glowed with preemptive spell casting, magical energy coalescing into portable containment matrices. Eunice had shifted her uniform configuration to combat mode, integrated systems humming with readiness. Looma stood resplendent in full battle regalia, all four arms bearing traditional Tetraman weaponry alongside more modern additions. Dimensional breach expanding at exponential rate, Eunice reported, monitoring feeds displaying real-time data. Consistent with Stage 2 incursion protocols as Siren described. The local space-time fabric will completely rupture within 23 minutes, Siren added, producing additional monitoring equipment from previously concealed compartments in her uniform. Sufficient for Annihilari scout entities to establish preliminary footholds. Not if we have anything to say about it, Ben declared, the primordial matrix pulsing in agreement beneath his skin. He looked at each team member in turn, seeing determination reflected in diverse expressions. Time to show these interdimensional invaders why they should have stayed in their prison dimension. As they moved toward deployment, Looma fell into step beside him, massive frame radiating confident energy. The trial of strength revealed compatible worth, she noted quietly. But battle reveals true character. I look forward to observing yours, Ben Tennyson. The simple statement carried layers of cultural significance, Tetraman assessment continuing despite formal trial postponement. Every action now would be evaluated through the lens of warrior tradition, their cooperation against common enemies simultaneously test an opportunity. Ben found himself oddly comfortable with this dual purpose. Just try to keep up, princess. A surprised laugh rumbled from Looma's chest, genuine amusement rarely displayed in formal settings. Perhaps you are worthy of respect after all. Bearer of the Primordial Matrix. As the team deployed toward the dimensional breach, Ben felt the Primordial Matrix pulse with almost eager anticipation. Whatever came next would test T.R. newly forming bonds as both team and individuals. The converging threats, Annihilari incursion and Tetraman challenge, would either forge them into effective unit or prove them inadequate to the cosmic responsibility thrust upon them. Either way, the true trial had only just begun. Chapter 2 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.